would a vampire bother with a garden in the first place? That's where this episode's story begins. Hey, I'm Amanda, and this is Acutely Amanda, where we alternate between fiction and fiber art seasons. Do you love crafting, getting lost in fantasy worlds, or maybe both? Then this podcast is for you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. So let's dive in. Since it's season 3, we're in fiction mode. I'll be sharing a short story and then, like last season, exploring the inspiration, process, and real-life threads woven through the piece. All of season 3 takes place in my Tova Gallagher universe, a paranormal Boston where angels, demons, werewolves, and Nephilim, half-demons, walk among us. Today's short story is A Vampire Gardens at Midnight. The 247-year-old vampire stands in her walled East Boston backyard, staring at the tiger lilies pushing up through the spring earth beneath a waxing gibbous moon. If she closes her eyes, she can imagine them in bloom, narrow leaves overflowing into small bushes with giant orange blobs on top. It makes her sick, both in the way of the vampire, teeth aching, and in the distantly remembered human way, stomach twisting. "Madame," her oh-so-young familiar dressed all in black interrupts. "What is it?" "Assistant Governor Smith is here to see you. I told him you were busy." She holds up a hand, stopping her overeager rambling. "Send him in." The familiar nods her assent and disappears. A few moments later, Assistant Governor Smith arrives in her place. "Madame." "Assistant Governor." "I told your familiar to leave us be." She nods, pulling on a gardening glove. "Quite." He glances at the moon as she bends down to the tiger lily, grasping its base and giving a tug. It doesn't budge. "What do you think of our governor's plan for the werewolves?" She glances up over her shoulder at him. "I think what I said in our meeting." He cocks his head and she turns away, tamping down how angry everything about him makes her feel. His stubby little English body reminds her of the smelly sort who would show up at her brothel when she was human, judging her girls but still desiring them. He speaks again. "I somehow doubt that, madame." She picks up a small trowel and begins to dig around the base of the tiger lily. The musty scent of dirt hits her nose with the faintest hint of iron from blood spilled long ago. Her fangs make a micro-movement toward extending down. She pauses, thinks of cake. They retract. "Even if that were so, why should you care what I think? I'm not an elected official. I'm just an ordinary vampire." He gives a dry laugh. "We both know there is nothing ordinary about you." Even though he cannot see it, she raises an eyebrow. Perhaps the assistant governor is more astute than she's given him credit for. He continues. "Nothing in politics is ever as simple as the most highly elected official having the greatest sway. Even humans have lobbyists." The roots extend far more deeply and broadly than she was expecting. She switches the trowel for a hand rake and digs it in among the small roots. "For that analogy to work, I would need to be approaching you." He gives a small huff. She smiles, pleased that her dig landed. "Details," he downplays her barb. "My point remains. You have sway and respect among our people, even without a title beyond the one you've held for 155 years. You've done your research." Dozens, perhaps even 100 tiny bulbs the size of her thumb or smaller entangle below the tiger lily. He kneels down near her, but not too close. She makes a calculated move and turns to look at him. The sincerity on his face is sickening. "We need to win this, once and for all." He looks up at the moon once again. "I'm tired of worrying with the approach of every full moon. I suspect you are as well." "Yes, and so is the governor. Hence her plan." From her squatting position, she rocks back and forth with a hand rake, and a section of roots and bulbs comes out in her hand. "Hold up that plastic bag for me, please." He does as she bids, and she dumps the pieces of plant in the bag. "Why are you gardening? You can't enjoy daytime flowering plants anyway." "I'm removing plants, not adding them." She gives another tug and holds up the resulting mess of roots and bulbs and leaves. "The tiger lily is an invasive plant in New England. While some may find them beautiful, they are not native to the area. They send out invasive runners and spread easily. They displace the natives. They, quite literally, choke them out." He nods. They certainly don't come up with a new drug to turn the goldenrod into grass. There's a brightness behind his eyes that sparks a flash of memory. A meeting with the local underworld kingpin and a drugstore owner who she thought was simply part of the nouveau rich, but turned out to be so much more. A tightness forms in her chest, and she lets it out as an angry question. "What is it you want from me?" she asks, even though she knows. "Your partnership in an alternative plan." He stands up, paces away, raises his voice, ensuring any listening familiars or members of the household hear this part. "I trust our governor. It's a good plan." She stands as well, and when he returns to her, whispering at a volume only a vampire equal in age to his own can hear. "We must strike." He reaches into the inner pocket of his suit coat and withdraws a small round piece of silver. "In a more traditional way." The moon glistens off the bullet as Madame O'Malley responds. "It appears we have the same vision for our local garden, Assistant Governor." The end. Now, if you're watching or listening and thinking, what other pretty plants are invasive? Drop a plant emoji in the comments. This short story was written the same week I was knee-deep in invasive species removal in my own yard. Early drafts actually included way too much detail about the process. You could tell it was eating my brain. When we bought our first house last fall, most of the landscaping was tiger lilies. Pretty, sure, but they're invasive in my region, toxic to cats, and honestly a little boring when everything blooms at the same time and then leaves you with months of green nothing. I only managed to clear half of them this year, swapping them for zinnias, roses, echinacea, tulips, you get the idea. And of course, while I was digging, my mind wandered. Plant husbandry, after all, is about care, ecosystems, and renewal. But history shows us how often good practices are twisted, co-opted by fascism, by greed, by those hungry for control. In the Tova Gallagher universe, my vampires represent all of that. Their society's worst instincts given fangs. Their politics mimic human systems, only every negative tendency is amplified. They run unethical experiments without consent. They exploit others for their own gain. And of course, they'd misapply plant husbandry to their own society of people. It's easier to recognize how wrong these choices are when you see them in vampires than when you see them in headlines. That's one of the gifts of fantasy. It makes the real visible. This scene also came from my backstory work for new characters, Madame O'Malley and Assistant Governor Smith. They're part of the sequel to Ecstatic Evil, which pushes vampires from the periphery right into the conflict. Werewolves and vampires colliding. Impossible to ignore for a woman dating a werewolf. The writing exercise that sparked this was simple. Describe inside your fictional world a task you know very well. For me, that was invasive species removal. My first draft leaned too hard into the step-by-step of gardening, so most of my edits focused on lifting the characters and their repartee until they carried the weight. That's the fun of writing exercises. Whatever you're obsessed with in draft 1 pours onto the page, and then the real work is balancing everything else up to match it. That's it for this episode of Acutely Amanda. If you enjoyed this little scene of vicious gardening, please give the video a thumbs up and leave a comment. It really helps more people find the channel. What hobby do you think is an odd one for a vampire to have? Drop it in the comments or tag me on Instagram @opinionsofawolf. Next week we're meeting one of the trickiest characters in Tova's world, her mother. Paranoid, unpredictable, and surprisingly right about some things. You won't want to miss it. And if you'd like to dive deeper into Tova's world, visit opinionsofawolf.com/publications and click on Tova Gallagher. See you next time. Bye!